We are uh, in our lectures on of classical and contemporary Marxist thought, and today I will be discussing with you the socialist thought of Robert Owen. Robert Owen was born in 1771 and he died in 1858. He was born in a place known as Newtown, Montgomeryshire, and is the fourth surviving child of a saddle maker and an iron monger. Uh, Robert Owen has contributed immensely to the socialist thought, whether it is in terms of education, in terms of the labor rights, in terms of cooperative society, development of trade union, and which led to the legislation called as the Factory Act. Robert Owen has also contributed in terms of writings, and some of his important writings are number one is A New View of Society, which was published in 1813. Then another important contribution of Robert Owen is known as Revolution in the Mind and Practice of Human Race, which was published in 1849. As I said, Robert Owen is an Englishman, and he later went on to become the manager of the mill business in New Lanark. And of course, before that, he has also been associated with many other, especially business in cotton mills and other other factories. Um, uh, Robert Owen left home actually at the age of 10, and he attended a school run by one Mr. Thickness. And of course, Mr. Thickness certified later that Robert Owen excelled in games, dancing, and also in lessons. And, to this effect, Mr. Thickson actually even later requested Owen's father to allow him to be his assistant at a very young age of 7 and 8, and because of his talent and his innovativeness at the very young age. We must remember that in olden days, children from very early age are being taken as apprentices in various factories, in various entrepreneurship. And so therefore, as I said, at the age of 7, Robert Owen was being requested by Mr. Thickness to actually work with him. In 1781, with the goodwill of his parents and 40 shillings in his pocket, Owen set out for London. And later he began to read extensively, searching for what he then aspired as the true religion. And while reading extensively from very early age, he was later forced to believe that there is no true religion, and therefore he rejected all religions. He even wrote saying that my reason taught me that I could not have made one of my own qualities, that they were forced upon me by nature. He further said that my language, religion, and habits were forced upon me by society, and that was entirely the child that I am entirely the child of nature, and society actually directed them upon me. Thus, he says, was I forced through seeing the error of their foundations to abandon all belief in every religion which had been taught to man, but my religious feelings were immediately replaced by the spirit of universal charity. Which means that although Owen was convinced after he experienced his life, and also after having read extensively, that there is no true religion, that his qualities were forced upon him by the environment, by the nature, and it was directed, this was being directed by the society. Therefore, he says all religions have various errors within them, and therefore I am going to abandon every religion and I am going to accept the new spirit of universal charity. Which means he is going beyond the boundaries of every religion. He later in life, Robert Owen moved to Manchester to be, which was to become his home, for 14 years. 14 years or even more than that, and there he started his industrial career. Later, Robert Owen became he went on to work as manager in cotton industry, in which he was commanding about 500 men, women, and children. Initially, he said that he was moved by the way the industries actually functioned, and therefore, for a few weeks, he wasn't able to actually direct anything upon them because of the condition in which these people actually work, and the nature of stringent rules and regulation which didn't allow people to have a dignified life at all. Neither he was also very much moved by the presence of children actually in the factories and the way they are forced to work long hours. Robert Owen later he married a lady known as Carolyn, who was the eldest daughter of David Dale, who was the owner of the New Lanark Mills. New Lanark Mills is almost like a society. It has number of mills altogether, and eventually he became the manager of these mills, and he devoted his next 20 years in serving the people, in managing these mills, and also serving people working here who were about 2,000 in numbers. He started organizing them as well as ensuring that they were getting certain dignified, certain amount of dignity which weren't given to them before the arrival of Robert Owen. So before we would be able to understand the plight of the workers during that particular point in time. Let us now try to understand the sufferings of workers in the 19th century. You see, first of all, workers were made to work for very long hours in the day, and their pay was at starvation level, which means they worked for very long hours while their pay was minimal, and they had to work in certain inhuman working conditions, and their housing, housing was almost beyond any belief. The housing quality that was given to them was beyond any, beyond any belief, which was very, very grim, But despite all this, Robert Owen thought that the most important evil in factory system that existed at a point of time was the treatment of children. And therefore he would go on to bring about reform in education, to bring about reform in labor laws, to bring about, to engage in the development of, the Factory Act, also to develop cooperative society for the laborers, as well as to engage himself in trade union so as to ensure that these people actually are able to get certain rights that was due to them at this point of time. Uh, the situation of the children, the treatment of children in most of the industrial sectors in England at that point of time was such that the American slave owners were jibed that their slaves in America were better off than the children in the cotton mills in Lancashire. So, therefore, Robert Owen, having been made the manager of the cotton mill in New Lanark, he started many reforms, and one of the reforms that he initiated was to bring about limitations of working hours in a day, and later he succeeded to introduce a 10 hour working period in a day. Karl Marx later, he pointed out that this was, laughed at as a communistic utopia. So, where his combination of children's, education with productive labor. So, to cut things short, this utopia of Robert Owen soon to become a factory act. As I said earlier, it soon became part and the most prominent aspect of the factory act, which was passed in England at that point of time. Robert Owen also went on to improve the housing of the workers, and also he started building schools and these nurseries to take care of children. What is known today as creches was started, of course, during that particular point of time, initiated by Robert Owen in order to take care of children, because later he would, he would introduce a system where children below the age of 10 would be kept away from factory system, and they would be encouraged to actually be sent to these nurseries to be educated. He himself, he sought to educate children as as he says, as human beings capable of applying the reason to nature and society and enjoying all aspects of life. This is his concern. In New Lanark, these ideas were translated into practice, and Owen put an end to the practice of employing pauper children, or rather poor children, and had withdrawn all children under the age of 10 from working in his factory. Later, he limited hours of the working hours of adult, as I said earlier, from 12, and then later to 10 hours. He believed in certain, economic ideas, that you pay them well, let them work, during that particular period when they would be able to put their best, and therefore you will get maximum productivity out of that. So, throughout the 1820s, Robert Owen turned to the while he has worked with the formation of educational institutions in New Lanark, where he actually give more emphasis to children getting education, not only normal education, but education that would make them capable of handling situations in life. He also inculcated the philosophical development of educational ideas, where children would be able to spend more time with themselves and understand their capabilities within. And after he has done this, Robert Owen turned to the formation of cooperative villages, in his New Lanark, some of which were already, being run by his followers known as the Owenites in Scotland, Ireland, and Hampshire. And through this cooperative society, Robert Owen intended to, you know, ensure that the factory workers, while joining hands among themselves, they would be able to, you know, ensure that they get all that they need at a cheaper price because of the cooperation among them. Workers would contribute, contribute certain amount of their, pay to set up certain outlets like shops for their daily necessities, and therefore they would buy those those materials needed from the wholesale market, from the suppliers, and bring them to their shops, and then people would buy them at cheaper rates, and a little profit that is being gained through these shops would be invested in the education of the children, would be invested in the recreational centers, because Robert Owen believed that people, after having worked for long hours in a day, they need certain amount of recreational space and recreational time. So therefore, people, adults were being encouraged that after their work they would spend time for themselves to walk around in the in the campuses, and enjoy the environment, enjoy the beautiful surroundings that have been and the facilities that have been given to them. And this, he says, would enable these workers not only to focus on the aspects of production, but rather they would also be able to help themselves to become more innovative, and also would encourage themselves to get engaged in development of new ideas through education. So Robert Owen, while he engages children to study during the morning hours and day hours, he would encourage the process of what is known today as adult education, where he would encourage the workers in the evening to engage themselves in the gym, in a kind of gym, so that they would, through these gyms, they would be given certain amount of education, so that they would be able to, the adult would be able to have certain time for themselves, and also in the process learn about philosophy, learn about art, learn about culture, and so on and so forth, so that they would every day become more innovative, more creative, so as to also think about what is the future prospect of their own life in the factory. So so therefore, Robert Owen, as I said, he set up this society in New Lanark, and in through this society that he established in New Lanark, he went on to start what is known as the New Harmony in the United States of America. To start a society known as the New Harmony. And in this New Lanark, Robert Owen was actually trying to experiment as how to develop the idea of developing harmony with oneself. Although the workers would be engaged, as I said, in long hours of work, yet now, since they are working only 12 to 10 hours, they would be able to have time for themselves, would have time for the children, as well as to attend these these community based gyms or community based educational institutions. They would also be allowed to participate in drama, in acting, and so on and so forth, so that as I said, to encourage them to get more involved in the community activities, as well as to think about the future prospect. Later, Robert Owen entered into trade union, and his road to the new moral world was seen through the origin of, at that point of time, called as the Grand National Consolidated Trade Union. And in few weeks, this trade union expanded with almost 1 million members registering themselves to be part of this movement. But as much as his attempt to bring about reform in the, in these cooperative community projects. He later, this trade union project of his later collapsed because more people actually started leaving this because they found this cooperative society difficult to function. So now, in brief, what is the contribution of Robert Owen? Robert Owen also contributed immensely to the, to the development of what is known as the economic thought. What is his basic idea of economic thought? His basic idea of economic thought is, what he says as the economy of high wages. So Robert Owen believed that in order to be able to extract maximum from the workers, it is better off to pay them high wages, let them work, within a certain stretch of time when the workers would be able to actually give their best, and in this way, the factory will make more profit, and the workers would also enjoy working. And that is what he called as the new harmony, or that is the new moral world, wherein people would be having certain dignified life while also engaging in their factory activity. Now, in short, what can we think of Robert Owen? Number one is, apart from all these projects in terms of labor reform, in terms of education of children, in terms of cooperative society. By the way, Robert Owen for some time has been considered as the founder of cooperative society, but of course there are certain debates on that. But the fact that Robert Owen brought the cooperative society to the limelight of administration policy making is certainly his contribution. Although cooperative society, some people have argued, have existed before that and after that, and in different ways, and this is exactly why cooperative society project at a certain point of time actually did not sustain in their movement. So apart from all this, how do we remember Robert Owen? Number one is, apart from all these projects, Robert Owen was an advocate of town planning and of green belts. Robert Owen, while talking about factory reform, as I said earlier, he also talked about recreational centers. He also talked about greenery in his community, so that people after working hours, they would be able to go for a long walk and refresh their minds with with nature, because he believed nature is the most important influencer of human mind. In terms of education, we can say that he was quick to demand and also to set up nursery schools, especially for the pauper children who are working in factories. Robert Owen must also be remembered as someone who has recognized the importance of recreation or play in education, and he was also one of those who suggested that teachers should be trained, whether it is by the government or other agencies. But he said teachers have to be trained in order to understand the requirements of children, and also to help them to grow in terms of their reasoning, to be able to tap their own capability. And and therefore, as I said, Robert Owen is a preacher of the economy of high wages. So this is basically what we understand of Robert Owen. So this is an introductory class, and in the next class I will go in detail as to what is his contribution in various socialist ideas. Thank you very much.